Welcome to Andy's Chomping at the Bit. Welcome to Andy's Chomping at the Bit, presented by Big Andy Media, the official sponsor of Andy's Chomping at the Bit. I hope you're having a wonderful Labor Day weekend. Today's topic is actually, I called an audible from what I said I was going to do last week. I'm going to do one on accountability. And the reason I'm doing one on accountability is because it's a great time for me to address that. Primarily because, well, you know how it goes. I usually do these shows on Friday. And I didn't do one this past Friday, and leading up to Friday, I already had the excuse. And I was going to use that excuse. At least I was going to use it as of yesterday and Saturday. That was the plan. I was like, well, I'll record it, release it later, and I'll say, well, it was because... And this is true on what happened as far as on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, I was at my parents' place. Well, part of Friday. You know, I went to a Michigan State football game as well. But aside from that, I was at my folks' place up in Ludington, and I was helping out a little bit with things around the house. My mom's been having to take care of my dad on top of everything with his broken back and do everything in the house on her own. So I decided couple weeks ago now that I'd be helping out when I can. So that was, 2-3 days a week, and going forward it's probably going to be 2 days, maybe 3 days in a couple of them, but it's just going to, mainly because of work, it makes it a little easier. But anyway, I left on Thursday, Friday's the show day, and I didn't do it because, well, I didn't have the equipment to do it. I could have done it on my phone, but it's a lower production quality. So I was making that excuse. That was my reason not doing it, my excuse for not doing it. But that's not a good enough excuse. There isn't an excuse because I was aware of this since even before our previous show. And I had all the opportunity in the world to do it on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And I did a lot of other things as far as being productive. I did a lot of stuff with Big Andy Media. I did a lot of stuff as far as additional employment options outside of Big Andy Media, which is at least last week and this week going forward has been a pretty significant focus. But that I had the opportunity. I just didn't take the time. I did a lot of good things during that time. I updated the website, which was well overdue, and I'm still updating it because I'm restructuring the services aspect of it, making it easier to understand, easier for people to get scheduled for some of that stuff, like the jingle writing. But I didn't do the podcast. I had the time, and I just didn't do it. Part of accountability is admitting that you didn't do something, or admitting the choice you made, the poor choice, and not making excuses to justify that poor choice. My reason as far as why I didn't do it was simply I didn't make time. I didn't use my time in a way that was effective as far as the podcast was concerned. It was efficient in other manners, but it was not for the podcast. That's holding myself accountable for that choice. But it's not as easy as it sounds sometimes. Like I said, it was just yesterday and Saturday that I was, and even Friday, let's be honest, that I was contemplating, okay, well, this is my excuse. This is why. It wasn't really until I woke up this morning I said, I can't use that as an excuse. The whole point of this podcast is for me to talk about things I'm doing well at, things I'm struggling with, address topics based on how, through my own personal unique perspective, as well as observations. In the moment I realized I need to address accountability. That's why I'm choosing the topic today. That's why I went away from, I can't remember what I was originally going to do now, but accountability came up because that's where I'm at right now. I want to address it. And I can say I am doing very well overall with it, but it's still something I want to discuss. It's something that it's important. It's become a major emphasis in my life on all levels. And it's not easy on all levels. But it's essential for me. It's essential because there was a long time where I didn't hold myself truly accountable. I made a lot of excuses. In fact, there was a time where that's all I did. I mean, I can honestly say during active addiction, gosh, excuses were my bread and butter. Hold myself accountable, heaven forbid. But I don't want to be that person. I made that choice almost 3 years ago. Sunday will be 3 years clean and sober for me. I didn't just make that decision 3 years ago, or I didn't make that decision just on September 7th of 2022. Well, that's actually the date. I made the decision on September 13th of 2022. But it wasn't just that one day. I've had to make that decision consistently every day since then. Because if I'm going to change, it can't just be for a day. If I'm going to better myself, I can't just do it for this little period and then I'm done. I had to hold myself accountable across the board. And it started pretty early where I had to take some big, uncomfortable steps in holding myself accountable. Most notably would be when I left treatment. During the time I'd started this show, at the end of what I now call the first season, the first 5 episodes was right out of treatment, pretty much. I'm going to cover this during my reflection episode, which is going to be next. Technically, this is episode 50, but the special edition episode, I am not counting towards that number. So the 50th episode is actually going to be this coming episode. And it's going to be available both video and audio because I'm going to reflect on those first 5 episodes. You will be able to hear and see the difference. So you'll be able to get something whether you're doing the audio version of this or if you're listening to the video or watching the video version. Either way, you're going to be able to observe significant differences. That ended after the 5th episode because the day after that 5th episode, I had to do one of the scariest, hardest decisions. I had to make one of the hardest decisions of my life, just putting it simply like that. And that is, on that Friday, the following Friday, at 5:51 a.m., yes, I remember it to the minute. That was the last thing I looked at on my phone, that I rang the bell on the side of Muskegon County Courthouse / jail, and I turned myself in. Actually, it was Thursday, it wasn't Friday. Let me get that correct. I believe it was a Thursday. So it was actually 2 days after because that last show was on Tuesday. Anyway, I rang that bell, and this would have been, if I remember correctly, November 30th of 2022. And I turned myself in for a series of poor decisions that I'd made. I'd already faced and dealt with a lot of those decisions from earlier. To give anyone a recap if they aren't aware, at the end of my struggle with active addiction, I ended up spending over an 18-month span, I spent 14 months in jail. Of those 14 months, 7 of them were still during the active addiction time. But here's the beginning of the final 7 months. I had to turn myself in. Well, I didn't have to. I chose to. As terrified as I was, I chose to. And the reason I was terrified was because I remembered how slow time goes in there. Time goes so slow. It's hard. I can't even explain how unbearably slow time is there. Among other things, the food's crummy. And for some people, that's not a big deal. But for me, it's a huge deal. Poor nutrition is like the staple of some of those jails. Some are better than others. I'll admit that. Ottawa County wasn't too bad as far as in the grand scheme of things. Kent County should, by all means, be investigated for their horrible nutrition and lack of food. Anyway, I had to face that. And I didn't know how long I was going to be there. For all I knew, I was going to spend 5 years or 7 years or 10 years because I made a lot of poor decisions in a very short time. When it was all said and done in total, so I went from having absolutely 0 on my record. And anyway, I think I had 1 ticket in my life leading up to that, and that was my first freshman year of college. I got a ticket for running a red light that does not exist. That's a whole thing in itself. So this was the first time I legit was in trouble, and I ended up getting, in that span, 11 felony first-degree retail fraud charges, along with 4 misdemeanors, 2 of which were retail fraud-based, and 1 was a cocaine possession, or cocaine usage, my bad. And the other one was a joyriding, which is a weird way of saying borrowing without the intent to steal, which I think that's like the most common excuse people make when they steal, where it's just borrowing it. Anyway, it is still a crime. But I went from nothing to that much all at once, or relatively shortly. Everything happened basically in the span of 2 months. A very, very poor, rough choice. Anyway, so I had to turn myself in for those things. A big reason why I didn't do as much time as I thought I was going to have to do. And by the way, I originally, when I turned myself in, I was expecting a PR bond, which is personal recognizance. That's where they release you without having to be bailed out, and you give them your word they're going to be there in court. And so I went in and did the arraignment, and that's what they gave me. But I didn't know that I had another charge in another county, Ottawa County. And they don't announce there, so I kind of was blindsided by this. Anyway, I didn't get out until 7 months later. And I'm lucky that it was only 7 months later. It very easily could have been more. It was supposed to be more, actually. But the other counties decided to run things concurrent, which means that they ran the same time as I didn't have to go to each jail to serve each sentence. And that was huge. It wasn't supposed to be that way initially, but they somehow modified it. And a lot of it's because I worked on myself when I was in jail. Part of accountability is you're taking responsibility for your mistakes. Part of that is not making excuses, and part of that's doing something to hold yourself from doing it again, working to better yourself so you're less likely to make the same mistake however many times again. So I did that. I took a cognitive behavioral therapy course while I was in there by choice. I went out of my way for this, and I didn't do it for the courts. I did it because I needed it. In fact, when I was in Ottawa County, I asked them to give me an extra month while I was there because I didn't want to leave there without graduating from that course. Because I figured that was more important to me long term than the immediate seeing the outside. And trust me, I wanted to see the outside. But also when I was in court, I mean, that helped obviously, but in court, all of them, I had to take accountability. I didn't have to, but I chose to. I did a lot of retail fraud's not it's not the highlight of my life, that's for sure. I had to take accountability for it, though. I couldn't simply say, yeah, I did it. And I did it because I was an addict. I didn't know any better, or, I was under the influence. It affected me. Well, there's some truth to being under the influence and having an effect. But I'll tell you this right now, and it's not easy to admit, but damn it, it's the truth. I was aware of what I was doing when I did it. I knew when I did it that it was wrong. You can say that drugs and my addiction affected my my wanting to listen to it, or my might have affected my choice as far as listening to my conscience. But I can tell you right now that the drugs I was using, I was getting high beforehand, and I was getting high right after every time I did it, because I needed to drown out my conscience. I needed to drown out the anxiety, the fear, all those things that are natural. They're naturally in me to kind of like click on that light bulb. I'm like, hey, you're not supposed to do this. Hey, don't do this. You're going to get caught if you do this, because you know what you're doing is wrong. Those things were all naturally there, and I was intentionally choosing to drown them out. That's the power of addiction, but guess what? The choice was still there. Heavily influenced, yes, but the choice was still there. So I had to hold myself accountable. If I don't want to make that choice again, if I want to start learning from my mistakes, I had to hold myself accountable. It was not an easy choice. Let me make that clear. I'll say it again. Choosing to turn myself in, choosing to, in front of a judge that I knew was going to punish me, and multiple judges at that, I say, that were looking to punish me, and holding myself accountable, not just admitting at a plea, but actually, when given the chance to speak, taking full responsibility for my actions, admitting that they were wrong, and laying out a plan to change. What am I going to do while I'm locked up? What am I going to do when I get out and going forward? That was step one. Step two was actually doing what I said I was going to do. Not just saying what needed to be done, not just jumping through the hoops, which, trust me, there's a lot of stigma around people who have been incarcerated. And it's not fair to everyone, but guess what? I will be the first to tell you that there is a lot of truth and good reasoning behind some of that, behind some of those stigmas. Because though it doesn't fit everyone, there are a lot of people that are going through the motions. It's just the reality. And there's really not enough resources in jail to break that trend, I feel. At least not the ones I was ever in. Ottawa County is the closest to having something to break that trend. But you don't go to jail to get better, essentially. You go there to become a better criminal. And that's what was so scary about going there. I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to go back to that life. I was done with that. That's what made it so tough. And there's things I do now to kind of hold myself more accountable in general. Some of it, this is the one, I literally just observed this past week. I noticed the pattern this past week. When I discuss things or when I'm having conversation and something's brought up that I have to, or I don't have to, but I choose to address that might make me uncomfortable, but the truth I feel is more important than covering it up. And I do my absolute best, even if it's not relevant, even if it's not something significant, I do my best to not lie. And that was not always the case in my life. Anyone who's known me over 20 years knows for certain, I'd say 20 years or longer, knows for certain that if I get the opportunity, I will tell one hell of a tale, especially younger. That's changed significantly the last few years. There's still times where I can get better, no doubt. But it's been something I've focused on. And so when I'm in conversation and I come to one of those points, I use the words, I'll either use something along the lines of honestly, and then I'll say to be honest, or being transparent, or to be upfront with you. All those things, I try using those in those moments. One, because it puts me in a spot where it gives me the opportunity to at least a little more comfortably say the truth. To be open and honest to the best of my ability. It makes it a lot easier. It's a good habit to be in. It's a very good habit to be open and honest, even when it's uncomfortable. Even when you know there's a chance that there might be a negative result for being honest. It's scary. I won't lie. You know, I can say this, in the dating world, that is terrifying for me at times. But I have so far, and I credit myself and knock on wood that I keep on doing it, I have held myself accountable on those things. I've been as honest and transparent. I'll tell you what, telling someone that you are a recovering addict is terrifying at times. Telling someone that you like and appreciate that you are a recovering addict, someone who has a lot at stake as well, it is terrifying. It is important to address. It's important to point out what I'm doing about it, the measures I've taken, the growth I have made, and the things I'm continuing to do and will continue to do. It's important to address all those, but I tell you what, it's still scary to bring it up. Because it's happened before. I've brought it up, and guess what? Next date never happens. You know, people get scared. I think I've addressed this somewhat in the stigmas episode, but it's what happens. So it is scary to bring those up. You know, I'm fortunate that it hasn't completely. I'm fortunate that things are still going well in my the person I'm currently dating. Still very, very, very early on it, but yeah, it's tough to bring those things up. And there's things I still have to bring up, and my big thing is I hate avoiding. It's a new thing that I never used to hate. I used to love it, but now I actually hate the feeling of avoiding because I feel bad when I don't address something right away. And sometimes things don't come up right away, but I tell you what, it still feels bad when you don't address them. It's part of being accountable, I feel. I mean, being honest. Honesty and accountability go really hand in hand in my eyes because you got to own up to your past. Part of trust is not just being honest, but it's also it's making the adjustments. That's I think where accountability comes in. So I do those things. I'll say honestly, to be transparent, to be upfront. And I can get better. There's things I can do a lot better, no doubt about it. I'm still a work in progress. I will always be a work in progress. That's a good thing. The second you're no longer a work in progress, you are either dead or you're going downhill. Nobody truly knows what's next for them around the corner. We don't have anything guaranteed other than the now, right now. I can choose to live and hide making excuses, or I can do things that will make my life with as few regrets as possible. I can say that I won't regret being honest. Yeah, it's hurt me in the past. So is lying. I won't regret holding myself accountable. Because even at the end of the day, if people disappear out of my life because they don't like that part or they're not comfortable, that's part of life. But I can live with being honest. I can live with holding myself responsible, telling the truth, working to better myself. And I respect other people who do the same. And I've been fortunate to meet some people that do the same. I've been fortunate to meet, really good people in my life. Right now, the people in my life are really good. And they do those things. They hold themselves accountable. I respect that. Tremendously respect that. No one's perfect. I understand that. But I'm around a lot of good people right now. And I tell you what, it makes it a lot easier for me when I have people that let me be, that accept me when I hold myself accountable. I do the best the other way as well. So that's one aspect, admitting it, holding myself, being transparent. The other side is I enable certain people in my life, my parents, my best friend, to help me in those situations. It's okay to ask for help, even with accountability. Setting up safe measures. For me, my parents, my best friend, they can see where I am at any times on their phone. They can track me. I don't care. I actually gave them that responsibility, or I asked them to take that responsibility. They gladly took it, and I let them handle that if they want. If I'm going somewhere, I like to share anyway with my friends and family. So they usually don't even, they pull up their phone and they see where I'm at. Well, he said he was going to be here, so there he is. Oh, he actually said he was going to be here. He's here. Let me call, find out why. That happens. I tell him, honestly. The whole point of me giving them that access is because I know I'm a recovering addict. And early on, those extra safety measures helped me hold myself accountable. They helped me in times when I was really struggling early on from making the poor decision of going where I shouldn't go, doing what I shouldn't do. My parents have a drug test kit at home that I tell them, if you have any question on whether I am under the influence or have used recently, do not hesitate. Do not hesitate to make me take a drug test. And I'm sincere about that. I am. I'm not just throwing a bluff. If they want to do it, do it. And I won't be upset. In fact, I'm still waiting. If anyone wants to chip in on this, I'm still waiting to take a hair follicle drug test. And I want to do it regardless because I want to have the results. And I want to frame them. And I want to show them to people because there was a time that I never in my life would have, I shouldn't say never, the time period. So during active addiction and early recovery, I never thought I'd be able to say, hey, look at this. I can take a drug test of any kind at any time, and I will pass. And the hardest one to pass is the hair follicle because it can go back to like 6-9 months. It's crazy how long, I think it's 6 months, how far back it can go. I want to be able to do that and be like, look, that's a proud moment. But that's how significant accountability is to me. I'm okay with having others help me because I value it. I value it in me. I value it in others. I make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. I'm not above it anymore. I still do it. I occasionally will say a lie or I'll exaggerate embellish a story. It doesn't make it okay. That's where accountability comes in. I still have to hold myself accountable in those moments. Sometimes it comes 2 seconds after I say it. Those are great moments. It's kind of funny, but at the same time important that I call myself out on it. Sometimes it doesn't happen until later. Sometimes I still have to give friends a call and be like, hey, remember that time like 5 years ago when I said this? Actually, it wasn't 5 years ago. It was like 15 years ago when I said this. Yeah, that wasn't true. This is actually what happened. And they're like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm okay. Are you doing one of your steps for recovery? No, I'm not doing one of those steps. I'm literally, I remembered and I'm tired of avoiding it. And that's where I'm at. Well, that's today's episode. Like I said, next episode is going to be a fun one. It's going to be a look back reflection. It's going to be both video and audio. And I'll cover that, the episodes 1 through 5. And I'll take little clips from it, and we'll go over those, and you'll be able to see a side-by-side comparison of some of the changes, not just in sound and vision, but also in perspective. It's a lot of fun looking back at this. I did it all through the week, because all through the week I thought this was the 50th episode, but then I realized I don't count the special edition one. So stay tuned for the next episode. We'll just say Flashback. That's a good title for it. Until then, I will see you later. Take care. Andy's Chomping at the Bit is brought to you by Big Andy Media.